Zoe, good afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian.
Nice
Thanks
having
for
you with us.
having me.
This is a right old mess, isn't it? Because, you know, it's the sort of air bubble effect. Somebody, and you can see the panic almost in number 10 and the Home Office thinking, right, how do we sort this out? Oh, if we push that air bubble down, it's fine, but then it pops up somewhere else. And we have a shortage of workers in some areas, hence the reason why we have immigration at this level, or in part why we have it at this, even if you take out Ukraine and Hong Kong. Why we have big numbers is partly due to a shortage. Simple as that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And you're right that obviously this has sent the government into a tailspin. I mean, it's quite confusing how they didn't see it coming, given that the government is responsible for issuing and approving every single one of those visas for every single one of the people who make up those high figures that we've seen come out this week. But yes, they've done it because there are drastic labor shortages. And so we rely on migrant workers to support the biggest group at the moment is our social care workforce, where there's still 100,000 vacancies, even with the high levels of people that have come here to care for our sick and disabled and elderly family members. Then, of course, there's farm workers, there's construction workers, there's all sorts of areas of skills in our economy where we simply don't have the workforce. And that's why the government has introduced these sort of piecemeal individual schemes for different sectors to bring people in to plug those gaps, which isn't really a satisfactory or sustainable way of going about this. We should really have an overhaul of the entire immigration system. But that's what they seem sort of inert and unable to do. And instead, they're sort of panicking with these knee-jerk reactions of some more piecemeal reforms here and there. And I don't think it's convincing anyone.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. And you're absolutely spot on. I mean, it was curious to see ministers discombobulating. I mean, this is not the Channel migrant story. That's a whole separate thing. I can understand you don't know the numbers. But to see ministers saying, you know, how did this happen? Is well, you issued the visas. That's how it happened. This is all perfectly legit immigration. There's no big surprises. They would have seen the numbers on the books at the Home Office way before we saw them, so they knew what it was going to look like. In terms of what they do about it, though, Zoe, they're talking about this list that they want to get rid of, the shortage occupation list, which, of course, is a curious thing to do if, by definition, it's a shortage of certain occupations. How do you then fill those jobs?
Well, you wouldn't be able to. I mean, I think it's hilarious, actually. If you look at, for example, Robert Jenrick, who's the immigration minister, if only today's Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, could have spoken to Robert Jenrick of 6 months ago, the immigration minister who added several types of construction jobs to that very shortage occupation list that today he says he's been calling on the prime minister to scrap for over a year. It'd be very interesting to get the two of them to meet and have a conversation about what really happened there. Yeah. But regardless, I think you make a really important point. So I think I agree, actually, that the shortage occupation list doesn't do us any favors. It allows people to be brought in to work in jobs that are so important to our economy, so important to our lifestyle, our well-being, everything we need, sort of essential jobs, at a low rate of pay, and that isn't right. We should have decent pay and decent conditions in those sectors. The problem is that if you remove the shortage occupation list, what the list actually does is it's a list of jobs that are exempt from the salary threshold that we also have for other skilled migrants. So we have a salary threshold at the moment at £26,000. You have to be paid at least that in order to come in and work in any skilled job in our economy, unless it's one of the jobs on the shortage occupation list. Now, if you get rid of the shortage occupation list and you raise the salary threshold as they're proposing, you end up in a situation where, unless you want to propose paying all care workers and all farm workers and all construction workers over £35,000 a year, which actually, you know, I'm sure a lot of us would be up for that conversation, but I don't think it's on the table. Then you end up in a situation where you've just hamstrung yourself. You can't recruit the workers we need. And then, of course, we have a care system that crumbles. We have the absolute inability to build the houses we so desperately need. You have food rotting in fields and not being able to make it to our supermarket shelves. That isn't practical. It isn't realistic. As I say, it's just a desperate sort of, you know, reaching for whatever sounds plausible from government ministers and this government, because they don't know what they're doing on migration. Really, they don't.
Do you know, I was hoping to have a right old row with you, Zoe, but I found myself agreeing with you at every level on this point. I mean, it is an absolute mess here at the moment. Listen, always good to talk. Thank you for your time, Zoe Gardner, who is migration policy expert with us, joining me